All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Certrec, and we are presenting our webinar this afternoon on PRC-027. Our presenters today, my name is Chip Perkins. I'm the Business Planning Executive Director for Certrec. And with me today is Evans Heacock, and Evans is the Director of our Office of NERC Compliance. He will be providing the majority of our webinar for today. So just some introductory information. Please keep your phones muted. With many of us working from home, there's lots of ambient noises going on in the background that are challenging to control. And also, please don't place the call on hold. This may end up with music or beeps distracting all of our participants. And then finally, I'd just like to ask that you submit any questions that you have using the chat feature on GoToMeeting panel. We're going to address your questions and give you time to actually interact verbally at the end of the presentation. So just two things we want to talk about today. Very quickly, a little bit of introductory information about Certrec, and then spend most of our time talking about PRC-027 protection systems. Certrec has been in business for over 30 years. We were founded in 1988. We are regulatory compliance experts that help utilities and other entities manage the regulatory process to their advantage. We have more than 60 employees and another 65 associates, so we have a tremendous amount of resources to call upon and bring to bear. And all told, our employees have more than 1,200 cumulative years of both regulatory and advanced information technology experience. And along those lines, we have substantial IT and cybersecurity capabilities, and we manage over 4 terabytes of industry regulatory data. We have contracts with all United States nuclear utilities and clients in every one of the NERC regions. And we've been expanding our offering of services into training through clever use of present-day technology and video. Just like to speak a little bit about, and I mean briefly, about some of our technology certifications. Certrec actually has an ISO 27001 certification. And what this speaks to is a suite of actions that we take in order to ensure physical security and cybersecurity of all of the information that we manage as a corporation. So our ISO certification ensures that the security of your data and information has been addressed and implemented and properly controlled. And all of our applications operate off of our own servers in a world-class hosting facility in Dallas, Texas. And along the left-hand side of the slide, I'm not going to cover them, but you can see a dozen or so specific control objectives that are met under our ISO 27001 certification. Companion to that, we do a SOC 2 Type 2 examination each year, and that is done by a third party. And that examination is done to be sure that we are meeting all the requirements to maintain our levels of service and security to appropriate standards. So we have the ISO certification and a SOC 2 Type 2 examination, and these are renewed each year. So with that as a little bit of background, I'm going to turn the presentation at this point over to Evans Heacock, and he's going to talk about PRC-027 and protection systems. Evans?
Thank you, Chip. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar. Give a little bit more background on PRC-027, which is coming up here in the near future, unless it gets deferred. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the slide. So this was developed as part of the Project 2007-6 System Protection and Coordination in response to FERC Order 693. And its purpose is to maintain the coordination of protection systems installed to detect faults and isolate faults on the bulk electric system elements, those are the protection systems. Mainly the idea being to get everybody to ensure they are coordinating their system with usually the transmission provider. Going to the next, we'll talk about some relationships for PRC-027. As you can see, we have a list there of the PRC-1 And you can see that requirement 2, requirement 5, and 6 were retired in 2017. And then, as part of the overall effect, requirement 1 is actually being put into PER-006, which will actually also be effective at the same time as PRC-27. And requirements 3 and 4 are being handled by the standard we're talking about, PRC-27, and that we will be talking about during this webinar. So implementation, presently the effective date is October 1st of 2020. Again, right now, some of you may have noticed a submission by NERC to FERC to delay that due to the COVID pandemic right now, about 6 months. That has only been sent to try to push that out. It's not been changed yet, so right now we're still holding to the October 1st, 2020. That's the effective date and when the items need to be and will be effective as we go through them. With also a new term has been added to the glossary, the NERC glossary terms, protection system coordination study. I won't reread that, but it's, just giving what it means for this particular case. And then PRC-01 at 1.1 retires when PRC-27 and PER-6 become effective. Again, that will still be dependent on a move date or not. The items that are covered by PRC, the entities, there are 3 of them that are listed here: transmission owners, generator owners, and distribution providers. The reason for that is the coordination needs to be between these folks. Typically, anybody that does have a generator is going to primarily be talking with transmission owners, since most times they do connect straight into transmission systems, but not always. And then next we have sets of 3. So we just had, we have another set of 3 what we'll be talking about. The first one is establish a process for new or revised protection settings. 3 is use procedure to establish new settings and revise existing settings. And then number 2, establish periodic actions to review your protection system. Now you see them in this order. We mean for them to be in this order because we're going to go through them this webinar using them in this particular order. So it is intentional to see it as 1, 3, 2. So starting off with requirement 1, this is straight from the PRC standard, and this is basically saying that everyone shall establish a process for developing and revising protection system settings. This is probably the main one you need to come up with when you're first getting into the PRC and establishing it. You do want to set up how you're going to set it up and control it. So the inclusions of these items are part 1.1. It's to review and update short circuit model data for the BES elements under study. Typically, this is the same information that you should be providing to your transmission planner currently, required by existing standards. Requirement 1, part 1.2, you need to review the developed protection system settings. And essentially all that is that once it's completed, you need to have an independent set of eyes basically going over it, making sure that the information is correct and that it includes everything that needs to be included as part of the coordination study. Requirement 1 and 1.3, this is make sure that the protection system settings applied on all BES elements for electrically joined facilities owned by separate entities, so which means transmission owners, generator owners, distributions providers, with the following provisions. Again, the bigger part of this standard is get people to coordinate and discuss what's going on between each other, so that you do not have issues between settings of the various sites. You make sure you coordinate with your neighbor in the end. And when I say coordinate there, it means electrically coordinate. The provisions are listed below. You'll notice that the keywords are identified in red, which are provide, respond, address, and communicate with your neighbors. So first part of it is provide settings to your electrically joined facilities. The second one is to respond to any request for settings. And then to verify that identify coordination issues associated are addressed prior to implementation. So if you're doing the study and something comes out that doesn't look right, you need to make sure you get the the settings corrected before you implement. And then the end is to communicate with other owners that are joining the facilities that you tie into, especially when resulting from unforeseen circumstances that could come out of implementation, commissioning. This operation investigation will probably be one of the biggest ones people need to keep in mind on. This missed operations and maintenance activities. This also applies to emergency replacements, like changing out relays. You may not be able to get the same setting if you change to a different type of relay or CT, something that might cause a change in your setting. Requirement 3 is that each transmission owner, generator owner, and distribution provider shall utilize this process, establish and requirement 1, develop new and revised protection system settings for the BES. So really what that's getting into is you make sure your own and new revised settings developed, that you have your neighbors' new and revised settings, and that you identify and coordinate any issues that are found because of that. And going into requirement 2. Again, this is straight out of the standard, but basically you're looking at any kind of element, protection element that has that can affect, the bulk power system. And out of attachment A, we talk about the distance relays, which are number 21, the instantaneous overcurrent, the time overcurrent relays, and then also directional overcurrent relays if used in a non-communication aided protection scheme. So these are the main ones they're looking at for coordination between typically the generator and a transmission owner. So going over the requirements, I'd like to say, they have several options. They decided to give multiple options for this coordination, which we'll go over next. And then the very first one is option 1, perform a system coordination study in a time interval not to exceed 6 calendar years. Again, this is straight out of the standard. Basically what they're trying to do is provide flexibility to choose an interval up to 6 calendar years for performing the protection system coordination studies for those protection system functions. This was intentional to give time for plants and transmission company to react to changes, as studies pop out with something different, either increase the short circuit or some other effect, transmission company changes their settings, but they're giving you time to be able to work through all items. Then for option 2, it's essentially getting a baseline fault current at your point of interconnection for a generator, and then comparing it over time to new studies, like year 2, you may have another study done, you want to compare it to that, and then year 4 and year 6. What you do is when you're comparing that, you got to compare your baseline to the new numbers. And if you get a deviation of greater than 15%, then you will need to do a coordination study at that time, but not to exceed 6 years. Let me clarify that. So for the option 2 steps, as we said, you compare the fault currents to the identified baseline fault, our number being 15% that we're looking at. So if you're less than 15%, you do not have any other action. If you're greater than 15%, then you'll have to do the protection study. Again, if you find that, it cannot exceed the 6 years from the initial baseline to do the coordination study. Option 3 is to use a combination of the above. So this is an example out of the standard. You may have a facility that connects into 2 different voltage levels. You may have one that ties to a 300 kV or above, like a 345 kV system. And you may want to use option 1 for it, which you can. And then you may have one that ties into, say, a 138 kV or something below 300 kV. You can use the fault current method. So you can choose a combination of these types of studies that you want to follow. And this ends up being an entity may choose and utilize the time-based method for protection systems or more critical facilities that use fault current based. So for the next steps, our initial coordination study does not have to be in place and completed until October 1st, 2026. Again, I put the unless changed, and that it goes back to NERC filing with FERC to push that out 6 months. And again, 2026 means you don't actually have to have your very first initial coordination study completed until that time, if you choose option 1. For option 2, you must establish your baseline fault currents by October 1st of this year, of 2020. Again, unless it's changed. After the initial baseline, you'll have to continually compare fault occurrence periodically. You cannot exceed 6 years of not looking at your baseline to new data. And the other thing is also for that is you don't want to wait to the 6th year or just before the 6th year, because if you do have a 15% greater change, then you'll be required to do a study quickly, which you don't want to get into. So for option 3, as you recall, we could use a combination of 1 and 2. So if you choose option 3, you follow the steps for option 1 above, like we already discussed, and for those places you want to use option 2, you follow the next steps for option 2. And you make sure you document the methodology that you use and how you're using it, applying it to which stations for the option 3. You do want to document all that so that when you're audited, you can tell the auditor what you're doing and they can follow the methodology.
I've got a couple of questions here for you that I wanted to ask. So give us an example of a process that people could use to make sure that they comply with PRC-027?
A process would be definitely a procedure that you have in place. Should be part of your compliance program, that you'd go ahead and write up how you're going to control and methodologies for controlling and reviews. Like we talked about earlier, we talked about you need to make sure you have a review in there, so you would make sure your process and which could be a procedure or it could be an analysis, that you're stating how you're following the requirements of PRC-027, but you would want to document that, and it goes in with your methodology that you're choosing. Make sure you include all your coordination between your transmission, what you're looking at from your transmission and your plant, and the methodology that you're using for option 1, 2, or 3.
So I have received some questions via the chat feature, so we'll jump into those. First question, Evans, regarding 1.2, R1.2, does the review have to be an external review, or can it be carried out by the internal subject matter expert?
That's a good question. It definitely can be done by an internal SME. The point being that it should be by another person besides the preparer. You want to have another set of eyes on it.
Okay, great. I have another question here. Does the GO, the generator owner, receive the baseline settings from the TO, the transmission owner? How are the settings determined or received?
Okay, so the GO does receive the baseline settings from the transmission operator. What they need to do is call up their transmission owner or provider, service provider, and ask them for the fault current at their substation. And once you get that, then you would want to document that information, that this is what you got from company X on day Y. As far as the settings go, that's actually then gets into your coordination study itself. You'd have to take that. If you're going to do a coordination study, you would need to take those and compare that fault level in your coordination study. It actually just goes straight in. And if you like to, I'd like to say, we can get into more depth with that, but that's a little bit beyond where we're at with our particular conversation on this.
Okay. Thank you all for submitting those questions. If you have others, please send them in, or I'll just wait a moment and see if anyone would like to unmute their phone and ask the question directly. All right, Evans, another question. What is meant by getting in touch with your electrical neighbors?
Hey, again, that's a good question. It's similar to the question that was asked by Thomas. And what you need to do, getting in touch, is actually reaching out, and this is probably the critical point of the standard being created in the first place, is that there was not enough coordination between the generator, typically the generator, and the transmission company, whoever it might be, TSP, distribution service provider, whoever it might be. And you need to reach out. All you're doing really is reaching out and gonna call and talk to their planners. You'll have to probably make a few inquiries when you're calling, but you just need to call, find out who's responsible, and then you start a dialogue with that group. And then as you do your dialogue, you do want to make sure that you show that you're having this dialogue as part of your compliance information.
Great, thank you. So we have another question from the participants. For GOs, why wouldn't you use the fault currents that your relink settings are currently based on?
You could, if that is exactly what they're giving to you as a fault level at your point of interconnection, that could be, and most likely would be, the same value. That could be considered the same.
Another question I have is, why did NERC decide to get rid of PRC-001 and replace it with PER-006 and PRC-027? PRC-027.
Okay, so that one is probably a little bit more complicated, but the biggest part of it is this PRC-01 did not really have any dates where you had to go back out and redo things. And what I mean by that, you didn't have the 6-year look at your studies now, and also looking at your fall currents every 6 years to make sure you stay within that requirement. They didn't really have that. And then also they're taking the PRC-001 training out and moving that specifically into training for the operations bunch. So they're separating the requirements. They were kind of overlapping requirements in there. So they took both out and will get rid of the PRC-1.
All right, thank you. All right, if now we're going to start to move toward a close. I just wanted to take a moment as we close to emphasize a couple things. First of all, both Evan's and my contact information, you can see it up on the screen. There's our office number and our email address. One participant asked whether or not the presentation would be available, and the answer is yes. Please contact us directly if you would like a copy of the presentation. I also just want to emphasize in general that Certrec, we are your NERC regulatory compliance experts. We have been doing NERC regulatory compliance since the standards were implemented back in the 2006-2007 timeframe. We have years of experience with all aspects of meeting those standards, and we are prepared to help you with all of those, well, just a great amount of detail. We currently provide the complete NERC regulatory compliance program for more than 40 registered entities, and we provide targeted scopes of work for many others, including investor-owned utilities and larger companies. And we also have some sophisticated online solutions that are just designed to make your jobs easier, such as RegSource GRC and Recall GRC. RegSource is a daily news feed of critical information that's going on, including NERC alerts and summaries and meetings and changes to regulations. Those come right into your desktop. We go through the industry, pull all that together, and put that into a summary that you can receive each day. There's also a website you can go to look at archives. And then Recall GRC, I just think that's a miracle application. We go out to dozens of websites and assemble all of the regulations, all of the standards, and put it in one place, Recall GRC. It's available via the web, and it is fully word searchable, complex searches. So no longer do you have to look into the black hole of individual websites throughout the country. It's all in one place, and we go out on a daily basis to update it. So you have everything up to date, all in one place. So again, Evans and I want to thank all of you for giving us this time this afternoon. We hope this was of some benefit to you. It's a complex world out there, and our job is to help you, whether it's directly or with these general industry webinars. So with that, we will end the call for today. And again, thank you very much for participating. On behalf of Certrec, that's the end of our webinar for today.
Thank you.